And once again, I want to say greetings to each and every one of you. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Roster Report here on LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. Weekday mornings, you and I get together live. We can reach you from 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's 12 noon Eastern time, 5 p.m. GMT, and 8 p.m. East Africa time. We get together with you and we deal with culture, consciousness, historical perspectives. We deal with entertainment, economics, education, health, labor, law, politics, religion, family, conflict, future studies, all areas of human interactivity and development. Today's date is Monday of February 2025 in the Western calendar. 65 in the Kemetic calendar too, which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place. On LIB Radio, LIB TV, here on livinginblack.com. We are continuing with the ongoing set of studies that comprise the upcoming book, The African Future. And I am really quite excited about what this book portends, what it means, what we have to contribute to the progress of rising to the African future. This is a futurist engagement, a futurist study. And let's pick it up to where we left off last week with the book, and I'm getting very close to finishing this. So tomorrow will probably be maybe the last of, or I may just, once the book goes to the printer, I may just keep this series going up so I can have a continuity of the audio files that serve the research for the book. I hope you find this to be informative, exciting, inspiring, and motivating to want to get together with a group and collaborate towards building this future of our dreams. So, where we are, and let's go ahead and pick it up for today. I just, all of you, our listeners to the show today, your input, your contribution, your presence is wonderfully appreciated. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that. You have found your family in a peaceful place on LIB Radio, LIB TV, livinginblack.com. Let me just get this queued up and get past a little bit of bugginess this morning with the computer and the connection to the internet. Sometimes it acts like that. And here we go. The chapter is entitled Ensuring Peace and Stability for All Africans. I began with this quote from the great Kwame Nkrumah, which kind of gives us a synopsis, an overview of what to expect in this particular segment of our analysis. Kwame Nkrumah said, "If we do not approach the problems in Africa with a common front and a common purpose, we shall be haggling and wrangling among ourselves until we are colonized again and become the tools of a far greater colonialism than we suffered hitherto." And those words from Kwame Nkrumah, I believe, are from 1965, the year before the collaborated in the overthrow. And he was, once again, profoundly insightful. And the problems and the solutions across Africa were not resolved, were not adequate. Kwame Nkrumah was one of those African leaders, Pan-African leaders, that were advocating continental union or continental unity now. But there was an opposing group. One was called the Casablanca group, and the Monrovia group, I believe, was the ones that says, no, we need to consolidate our country status before consolidating continental unity. The problem with that strategy was that the consolidating country status was clearly handicapped by the preservation of the colonial imposed borders from the Congo Conference, so-called Berlin Conference of 1884-85. They deliberately broke up Africa in a way that would cause the opposite, or that would cause disunity among powerful ethnic groups, nations, so-called tribes that had established themselves as powers, significant national powers before the colonization. So Kwame Nkrumah's words do loom large. I will read them again. I hope you hear them in the context that I hear them. If we do not approach the problems in Africa with a common front and a common purpose, we shall be haggling and wrangling amongst ourselves until we are colonized again and become the tools of far greater colonialism than we suffered hitherto. Kwame Nkrumah, former president of Independent Republic of Ghana. I began this chapter with this subchapter title, An Unbroken Global Legacy of Violence. And let me just 1 second here make sure that my listening audience for Africa One, I see you bright and early at the beginning of every chapter we do of this. I salute you for your focus, for your efforts. You remind me of Ubuntu. Ubuntu, I am, because we are. So going forward, let's continue. Here's what I wrote. I'm writing, I should say, because I'm still on the process of editing this book. An unbroken global legacy of violence. As illogical and inhumane as it certainly is, conflict, internecine violence, meaning brother fighting brother, and wars of imperial conquest continue to plague generations across the world. This beautiful planet has enough resources to support all of its 8.2 billion inhabitants, with prosperity and plenty of space for creative growth. And I would say 8.3 billion human inhabitants. As we understand, there are many, many more inhabitants of this beautiful pearl of a planet that are not humans. Like others wide, African nations also require peace and political stability to grow into their greatest potential. Today, more so than ever, we must apply the accumulated wisdom of history necessary to remove the pervasive scourge of war from our species. The foundation of history, the appearance of permanently challenged African conflict, is literally thousands of years in the making. Violent conflict between competing groups has been a key hallmark of civilizational progress from the earliest historical archives. According to the opinions of many scholars, especially those from more peaceful civilizations, European descended people have measured their history in terms of the wars they have fought. This history of violence encompasses their emergence as distinct groups and nations, transcends their rise ultimately to their decline, failure, and conquest on behalf of stronger warrior entities. Africans have not been the only long-term victims of this xenophobia instigated violence and domination. However, the record of the widespread Arabic enslavement, which is still ongoing at a much smaller scale, and the European instigated transatlantic slave wars gave evidence as to the horrible suffering that we refer to as the Ma'afa, the great suffering of enslavement. War, imperial conquest, and enslavement are as old as civilization, and the movement of large cultural groups across the geographic boundaries that facilitated group differentiation. Although humanity has mellowed out in many ways, the limited nature of most of the world's human consciousness has locked in these patterns of state violence, weapons proliferation, conquest, exploitation, and inequitable distribution of natural resources. A disproportionate share of media focus that we of the living within Western nations receive is focused on these never-ending conflicts involving the U.S., NATO, their allies, and enemies. While there should be an awareness that warfare is important news, at a point, conflict-related propaganda becomes a significant contributor to the perseverance of further war and conflict. Let me reread that last sentence. While there should be an awareness that warfare is important news, at a point, conflict-related propaganda becomes a significant contributor to the perseverance of further war and conflict. So let's take a look at what is happening in the world. Let's take a closer look at this war and conflict happening in the world today. Sorry, I needed an introduction to this next section, violent conflicts in the world today. So I write, let's take a closer look at this happening in the world today. Tracking so many ongoing and often fluid conflicts can be a disturbing challenge. As of February 2025, several wars and violent conflicts are continuing with varying degrees of Western involvement in nearly all of them. And as I'm reminded of the words of Martin Luther King, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is my own government. Let me make sure I get that one in here. Put this in brackets. I'm a note to self. Insert the words of MLK Jr., the greatest purveyor. Dot, dot, dot. So I'll know to come back and insert his quote because it's very, very relevant at that particular point. Most certainly it is. So one time here real quickly, let me just put a little highlight in and come back. Number one, and these appear in alphabetical order. This list of, and this is a long list. Number one on this list, Colombia. President Gustavo Petro's total peace strategy has faced challenges as armed groups, including the National Liberation Army, ELN, the FARC, dissidents, and the Gulf Clan have expanded their presence and heightened competition for control of illicit economies. While there have been some improvements, the conflict in Colombia remains complex and contingent on regional developments. Number two, Ethiopia. The Amhara region in Ethiopia is experiencing escalating repression and large-scale arrests of government opponents. This situation is reminiscent of the Tigray conflict in 2020 and could possibly escalate into a full-scale secessionist rebellion. Western nations and international organizations have called for a return to the rule of law. On the other hand, they have surreptitiously fed the conflict and armed rebel factions. Next on the list, Haiti, or Haiti, as many people would pronounce it. As of 2025, Haiti is engulfed in a severe crisis marked by armed warlords, political instability, criminal groups, so-called gangs, criminal groups, so-called gangs control 85% of Port-au-Prince and have expanded into other regions of the capital. Port-au-Prince have expanded into other regions, leading to widespread violence and disruptions in essential services. Over 5,600 people were killed in 2024, and 5.5 million require humanitarian assistance, with 5.4 million facing acute food insecurity. The security situation worsened after a major prison break in early 2024, with nearly 5,000 detainees escaping. A new transitional government aims to stabilize the country and organize elections, but its effectiveness is uncertain. International efforts, led by Kenya, Jamaica, and the Bahamas, to address the crisis have so far been insufficient, and the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. And one second, international efforts led by Kenya, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. I should say led by security forces, led by police or security forces, I'll call them, from Kenya, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. Again, last sentence, reread that. A new transitional government aims to stabilize the country and organize elections, but its effectiveness is uncertain. International efforts led by security forces from Kenya, Jamaica, and the Bahamas to address the crisis have so far been insufficient, and the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. Libya. Western nations have been involved in the conflict in Libya, supporting different factions and attempting to stabilize the continent. And of course, the old adage, you broke it, you fix it, should apply in Libya's ongoing crises. Yeah, that is true. The old adage, you broke it, you fix it, should apply in Libya's ongoing crises. Next on this list, number 4, Mexico. The country has seen an 18% increase in the lethality rate of clashes between non-state armed groups. The election in 2024 was marked by violent incidences targeting political figures driven by criminal to influence political outcomes and controlled the illicit economy. And bear with me, everybody. Normally, I set aside quite a bit of time to work out these details, reading it all through, but you're hearing me do it in real time right now. This is how a book gets written. Had to, sorry, I had to wet my whistle. And here we go. We'll come back. Number 5, again on the list, was Mexico. Again, what we've read so far, we've talked about so far, number 1, these are in alphabetical order: Colombia, Ethiopia, Haiti, Libya, number 4, Mexico, number 5, number East, the Islamic wars, conflicts between Israel versus Hamas, Lebanon, Syria, Iran, the West Bank, formerly Jordan until 1988, and occasionally Iraq. Despite a declared ceasefire in Qatar and Egypt in January 2025, conflict, civil violence, and political instability persists across Western Asia. Number 7, Myanmar. This Asian country, formerly known as Burma under British colonization, remains gripped by intense conflict. Ethnic armed groups and the People's Defense Force, PDF, continue challenging the military junta, with significant gains in regions like Rakhine and Ayeyarwady. The junta's, quote, scorched earth tactics, including indiscriminate airstrikes, have led to widespread civilian casualties and displacement, with over 380,000 internally displaced people and a severe humanitarian crisis. The military is preparing for elections in November 2025, which have been rejected by the National Unity Government and other rebel groups. International efforts, including ASEAN talks, have failed to bring about a resolution. The economy is contracting, exacerbating the humanitarian situation, with millions facing hunger and supply shortages. The conflict shows no sign of abating, with both sides entrenched in a protracted struggle. That's Myanmar. Next on the list, number 8, Pakistan. Following a year of political upheaval, Pakistan remains deeply unstable. The appointment of Shahbaz Sharif as prime minister has not restored order, and the country is grappling with rising levels of violent militancy, including Baloch separatists and the Tehrik-el-Taliban Pakistan, TTP. Number 9, the Sahel region. France and the United States have been involved in counter-terrorism operations across the Sahel region of Africa, particularly in countries like Mali and Niger, along with Somalia, and arming Sudanese factions. And I got to put quotes around counter-terrorism, because it's really not about counterterrorism. It's about keeping these nations within the economic orbit, within the natural resources orbit that feeds France and feeds the United States. Let's be clear about that. Number 10 on this list, these are in alphabetical order, is Sudan. The internal conflict in Sudan, involving the army and renegade paramilitary forces known as the RSF, has led to widespread displacement and humanitarian crises. While the conflict is primarily internal, it has received limited international attention despite the severe humanitarian impact which has placed Sudan as the most deadly and disruptive modern conflict. Despite the fact that it gets very little, if any, media attention in the United States, it is the world's worst conflict. Going forward, real quickly. Okay, here we go. Next on the list, number 11, Ukraine. The war between Russia and Ukraine now, today, reaching its 3-year mark. Now approaching, I wrote days ago, now I would say breaching its 3-year mark, continues to be a significant point of tension. The conflict can potentially upend the regional and global balance of power. Western nations, particularly the U.S. and European countries, have supported Ukraine, with the U.S. adopting a steadfast strategy to support Ukraine's arming and strategic efforts and other strategic efforts, including providing maps, training, military training, supplying mercenaries. All of these do figure in, including advanced weaponry, maps, satellite maps, I should say, satellite maps, training, and supplying mercenaries. The United States is not the only one doing this, but it is by far the most aggressive in using Ukraine as a proxy. Here we go. Next on the list, Yemen, number 12. Despite the global shift in attention to the conflict in Gaza, Yemen remains one of the world's worst humanitarian emergencies. The Houthi rebels continue to launch missile attacks on Western shipping in the Red Sea and on Israel, leading to military reprisals by the U.S., the U.K., and others. So that list was by far not comprehensive. I could have just listed one that was missing from there, and I'm going to put that in right now. Israel. And with Israel, with the case of Israel, we can see the outcome affecting 7 Islamic nations simultaneously and threatening others. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm just going to highlight that, because that That's 10 minutes worth of writing just right there. So I'm going to highlight that. I'll come back and finish that a little bit later. Let's go forward. Again, we got 13 different countries now, but that 13 included Israel, which drags 7 other countries in with it. More than 7, because Israel's now threatening Egypt again. These conflicts highlight the diverse and complex nature of global security challenges, with Western nations and private militias playing varying roles in fighting, financing, or supplying armaments in each. One website, Global Conflict Tracker, cites ongoing conflicts involving the following countries. They include Mexico, Haiti, Venezuela, Ecuador, Afghanistan, South China Sea, North Korea, Pakistan, India, Taiwan, Myanmar, Ukraine, Nagorno-Karabakh, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq, Palestine, Libya, Yemen, Sudan, the Confederation of Sahel States, Iran, Nigeria, Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, Somalia, Rwanda, Burundi, Mozambique, Benin, and Ethiopia. It's quite a list of ongoing violence on this beautiful water-covered pearl of a planet that we know as Mother Earth. We're reminded of those profound words from Rodney King, can't we all just get along? Question from Rodney King. Can't we all just get along? In the next subchapter, the ways war handicaps growth. The war hero, the American war hero, General Smedley Butler, is renowned for issuing his famous statement, "War is a racket." Again, Smedley Butler, war is a racket. War and conflict is yet another manner in which the wealthy create chaos that they exploit for profit and use it as a mechanism to weaken their competitors while terrorizing other would-be competitors from projecting similar challenges to the antagonist's hegemony. War is indeed a scam, a racket, and an act of criminal thuggery. War is a crime against nature. Civil wars destroy family lineages that have sometimes spanned centuries. Internecine warfare, which is brother fighting brother, is perhaps the worst, as it pits killers against others that any outsider can plainly see that they are the very same people. As much as we despise the practice, violent conflict has been around for a long time. It happens continuously all over the planet and doesn't seem likely to disappear from international political affairs in the near future. It may take an apocalyptic holocaust of nuclear war to convince mankind to move onto other means of solving conflicts. 1 second here, just double checking, making sure those of you in the listening audience are paid attention to. I do see 2 comments, and we're joined by Queen Mother Kashiba in the comments. She says, Hotep family, hit the like button. Good advice. And please, everyone, This is our wise and esteemed elder. That's why we call her Queen Mother Kashiba. And we are all beholden to the instructions of our wise and esteemed elders. We owe them that respect as they owe us their wisdom so that we can create a sovereign and sustainable future. I am an elder. Queen Mother Kashiba is in the house for Africa One. Do you see any hope for continental wide unity whilst our people are wedded to foreign cultures and religions which are counterproductive to our sustainable and sovereign future? The way you ask that question demands that those obstacles must be removed before we achieve continental wide unity. We do see unifying movements firmly going forward. We did see the creation of a new African nation on July 6, 2024, when 3 of the former members of the Alliance of Sahel States consolidated their constitutions, not consolidated the constitutions yet, but they did sign a memorandum of confederation, joining together the 3 governments of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. That is Africa's newest nation, and it's also now geographically Africa's largest nation, surpassing Algeria, which surpassed Sudan when it broke into 2 different countries. We also are seeing, and I'm still believing that it's going to happen, even though there are multiple challenges that keep rising, an alliance of the East African community, where we see now presently 8 nations in the EAC, and quite likely to include 2 more nations to join the East African community, with their intention, which they declared in 1999, is to form a powerful confederation. Already, one of those nations of the EAC, Tanzania, is itself a federation of Tanganyika and Zanzibar. Tanganyika and Zanzibar were 2 separate countries. Now they are one, Tanzania. Tanzania, along with Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Somalia, now are all 8 of them members of the East African community. It is expected that Ethiopia and Djibouti will also accept invitations to join the EAC. And in 2027, according to all of the research that I know about, and I'm holding on to this prediction, 2027, these 10 nations will form the 3rd most populous nation on earth and Africa's first true superpower state. But as it is right now, that superpower state is significantly challenged from the inside and from the outside. So we got a lot of work to do. I've got to get all of this together for my upcoming book, The African Future, and how we can move all of our global resources, 1.783 billion people on the planet. I think that's the exact number. I have that number in the book. I can look it up right now. The largest ancestral group, ethnic group on earth is people of African heritage and lineage, many of whom do not accept that African lineage and heritage because they perceive Africa to be weak, backwards, left behind. And we're going to have to work to change that perception. So for Africa One, do you see any hope for continental-wide unity? I not only see it, I pronounce it. I advocate. I am a champion of this hope. I am a cheerleader for African continental unity. I am a strategic planner for putting this together. I would hope that your question also carries your hope and your faith and your spirit forward as well. Queen Mother Kashiba in the house, yes, the Sudanese conflict is the worst. Unfortunately, the black press, media, should be ashamed of itself for not reporting on these events. If we look at the collective of black journalists, as they are represented across the spectrum, there are a few, very few, black media, press, independent outlets left. Many of them who traditionally we relied upon to serve our self-interest, such as Ebony, Jet, Emerge, The Defender, and no small number of others, there were hundreds of them, have been incorporated into the larger corporate matrix, which is not black controlled, black serving. Essence Magazine, another example of it. And when we're looking at the black press, well, some of the ones that are the biggest are actually not black owned. For a number of years, there was a couple of black social networks, and I can't remember the names of them right now. I wrote about them, that were not black owned, but were frequently cited by people of African heritage as points and sources of information. So you are right, Queen Mother. The remnants of black press, black media, and these journalists do exist. Many of them still professional journalists, but sold their careers to other outlets. Many of these journalists should be ashamed. They should be held accountable for being deficient of providing information. And some of the ones who we have created to serve our own autonomous and independent voice actually have it all wrong. We talked about, when we had our guest on last week, Chief Kamara, we talked about the Foundational Black Americans, this group created by Tariq Nasheed, and how they have absolutely got it horribly wrong. We talked about Yvette Carvell and what they call themselves? I don't know. They were separating themselves from global Africans living amongst us. I can't remember whether we call this, how irrelevant they've become. But we're going to have to root out this treachery. I don't think we should root out this treachery with conflict and war and beef and violence, but most certainly not. But just displace it with something that serves us much better. This is why you support your LIB radio, and this is why I am absolutely loyal to the ideas of diaspora, continental, global African unity, as well as harmonizing our relations with other groups who coexist on this beautiful water-covered pearl of a planet. I think that the beautiful water-covered pearl of a planet suffers immensely because of the domination, the residual domination of European imperialism and Asian imperialism. The Abrahamic religions have been quite problematic at creating conflict and disunity and internecine violence. We got work ahead of us. The new book, I think, will contribute significantly to the pathway ahead. I'm very proud of the fact that my books are having an impact across the motherland continent, where I am convinced our best hope for global prosperity is tied to Africa, the continent, its people, its babies, its future, its mothers, its geniuses, its innovation, its technological leapfrogging. I am convinced Africa holds the key to our past, present, and future. I am not the only one to believe that. There are many current scholars who support that idea as well. Hopefully, I put in outreach, hopefully, for this book that's coming out, some of these scholars are going to send an excerpt, a blurb, that will fit inside the new book, The African Future. Going forward, thank you for your inputs. To my beloved Sister for Africa One, for my beloved Queen Mother Kashiba Akwaba. Welcome. You have found your family in a peaceful place. Going forward, back to the book. We're talking about the ways that war handicaps growth. I'm going to repeat that last paragraph and then go forward. As much as we despise the practice, violent conflict has been around for a long time. It happens continuously all over the planet and doesn't seem likely to disappear from international political affairs in the near future. It may take an apocalyptic holocaust of nuclear war to convince mankind to move onto other means of solving conflicts. War hurts people, societies, nations, ethnicities, and humanity in so many ways. A few of these include: point 1, reduction in economic growth. Conflicts negatively affect both short and long-term economic outcomes, with the impact being more severe in lower income countries. Conflict often leads to the destruction of infrastructure, businesses, and markets, resulting in economic instability and reduced productivity. Point 2, increased poverty and hunger. Conflicts exacerbate rates of poverty and undernourishment, with a medium-sized conflict increasing undernourishment by an additional 3.3%. During war, resources are diverted to military spending and reconstruction efforts, leaving less for investing in social services and sustainable development. Point 3, impact on education. Conflicts hinder progress in achieving universal education, as seen in the analysis of the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, MDGs. Conflict disrupts education systems, leading to a generation of undereducated or uneducated individuals, which handicaps nations' future economic growth. Point 4, health deterioration. Conflicts result in reduced life expectancy and increased infant mortality rates, with a medium-sized conflict reducing life expectancy by about 1 year and increasing infant mortality by 10%. Wars lead to the breakdown of healthcare systems, resulting in increased disease, malnutrition, and mortality rates, further hindering development. Point 5, limited access to basic needs. Conflicts deprive populations from access to essential services such as potable water, with a medium-sized conflict potentially depriving an additional 1.8% of the population of access to potable water. Point 6, social instability. Conflicts often lead to forced migration, refugee flows, and the destruction of societal infrastructure, further exacerbating social instability. Even after a conflict ends, the aftermath can prolong instability, making it difficult for nations to recover and progress and to keep up with national development. Point 7, development gap. Countries that have experienced armed conflict have less favorable scores on all Millennial Development Goal indicators. indicating a significant development gap compared to countries that have not experienced conflict. Nations in conflict become isolated from the global community, limiting access to infrastructure investment, trade, aid, and diplomatic support. Point 8, long-term civilian suffering. Civil wars have long-term effects on civilian suffering, as measured by the World Health Organization's Disability-Adjusted Life Years, DALYs. Point 9, psychological impact. The trauma of war can have lasting psychological effects on individuals and communities, negatively impacting workforce productivity and social cohesion. In the aftermath of intense warfare, many citizens of the nation can suffer generations of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and cultural dysphoria. Point 10, environmental degradation. Conflicts can lead to environmental degradation, including deforestation, pollution, and loss of biodiversity, which can have long-term impacts on agriculture and livelihoods. These consequences, and many others, highlight the profound negative impact of war and conflict on a civilization's growth and progress, emphasizing the need for peaceful progress and sustainable development strategies that mitigate the risk of conflict. That takes us to the end of that chapter. I'm going to go ahead and keep on going because we are at the point where the book is going to have to be wrapped up. So right now, I notice I did come to the end of what has been written for the books, but I do have a chapter title and some notes. So let's just keep on going right now. We're going to move to the next chapter of the book, which is entitled Roots and Culture. I began this chapter with, as I do every chapter of the book, with a quote that brings us to the central theme of the chapter and expounds upon some of the profound ideas which come with that central theme. Again, the theme of this chapter, Roots and Culture. And I have this quote from my book, Mau Mau, Kenya's Land and Freedom Army Struggle. I wrote, and I quote, "Before the Europeans arrived, African societies had means for self-governance that flowed from the wisdom of the elders in apportioning the resources of the society for all of its members. After the end of direct colonialism, they came with their so-called democracy, quote unquote. They have upset the self-governing order of our indigenous systems. Now they are bringing their money lenders and globalist corporations for another round of stealing power from our leaders. Once again, they have tricked us out of what took thousands of years to evolve." That quote from my 1996 book, Mau Mau, Kenya's Land and Freedom Army Struggle. And as I came across that statement here very recently, it struck me as very profound and futurist in talking about now they are bringing their money lenders and globalist corporations for another round of stealing power from our leaders. Once again, they have tricked us out of what took thousands of years to evolve. I stick by those words. Ideas, and now I'm at the point where my book has turned back into an outline. My books began with outlines. And this is getting to the latter part of the book. The last few chapters, I'm down to my last 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters of the book. Maybe 3. So this chapter, Roots and Culture, here are some of the ideas, and I'm just going to be riffing on these. I welcome your input as well. If you think there's something that should go into one of these chapters or a chapter on roots and culture, please do. Please do offer what you think fits. I see you in the house, and Google just joined us. Hotep family, Hotep to you. Great to have you with us. I hope you've heard much of what we shared so far today. I just spent 52 minutes reading from the previous chapter of the book entitled Ensuring Peace and Stability for All Africans. Now we're talking about roots and culture. First idea up on the board is cultural tapestry, embracing Africa's rich heritage and shared destinies. We can look from the earliest stages, of Africa's pre-historical development. We look at things like, and I'm making bullet points, things like the Ishangi bone. I didn't mean to do that, but I did mean to do this. The Ishangi bone. Now I can put a bullet list together. Ishangi bone. Origins of mathematics. This is prehistorical. We could look at the actual age of the Giza Plateau monuments. The Hermakes, the so-called Sphinx, and the pyramids appear to have roots that may be 10,000 years old. We could look at the evolution of early civilizations. Zimbabwe, Kush, Nubia, Sheba, and others, including those of the Twa, TWA, people, and what are they called? In South Africa's earliest people, what are they called? The name is escaping me right now. And others in South Africa. I'll come up with the details a little bit later. So these are prehistoric developments. The emergence of language. Emergence of language. We could look at the people of Sumer, the blacks of Sumer, which is modern Iraq. So these would be prehistoric. Next up would be the next part of this, the power of African culture. And that would be, in modern day parlance, the power of African culture, an exploration of the role of culture in promoting continental unity and identity. So that's very important as well for us to touch upon. And again, right now I'm riffing because I've gotten to the end of a chapter, but we still have a few more minutes left. I'm not going to be riffing for too much longer, so let me just riff on a couple more ideas as I'm building this outline for this chapter. The power of African culture, promoting unity and identity, exploration of the role of culture in promoting continental unity and identity. We're talking about art, and other iconic symbology. Those would be in the pyramids and temple writings. There would be in coinage, the Benin bronzes. We could look at other examples of African dance, music, instruments, music including instruments. We could look at the, what is it called? The Jalia culture, the Jalia legacy. Jaliah legacy. The Jalia were the musicians who sang the histories of their peoples. Jaliyah. That's how it's spelled. The Jalia legacy. One of my friends, dearest friends, is a Jalia. And we could look at the global distribution of African artistic and musical motifs. So this is the power of African unity, promoting unity and identity as it adds value. The added economic value of African art and culture. And that could be used as a solid foundation for building future prosperity. That's right. So the idea is the riffs, they come. This is jazz. Jazz is enhanced by the ability to riff, to spontaneously create from a central motif, a central theme. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm hoping you, our listening audience, will be contributing as well. I do see some contribution. Kashiba helped my brain. And Kashiba asked the question, why is Tariq Nasheed different in his thinking from yours? Please explain briefly. I hope you had a chance to see the program or to hear the program we did with with Chief Kamara the other day, because he really hips me to this thing called Foundational Black Americans. And he sent me initially a video of two black men in the New York subways right on the very edge of a violent confrontation. It was extremely psychologically violent. And the black man who was the victim of this assault was apparently from either the CARICOM region or from West Africa. He had a very strong African accent. And the one accosting him was a, quote, foundational black American, part of Tariq Nasheed's collective. And the African American was insulting the African by every means. Wouldn't give him any respite. Was charging him. The African was backing up the whole time. There was a significant size difference in the two individuals. And it was, when I first saw it, I didn't want to watch it. And I told Chief Kamara I didn't necessarily wasn't excited about talking about beefs, but we did persist with a conversation, and I absolutely do not regret, absolutely wonderfully appreciative of what my brother, our brother Chief Kamara, informed me of that I was unaware of because my head's been stuck in academia. I'm not out here on the streets witnessing beef. I kind of abhor that whole thing. But what I did find out is this group, which reminds us of this other one. What was the name of the group that was founded by Yvette Carnell and another brother? Uh, Sons of African Slaves, something like that. It wasn't that exact. But these were not immigrant groups, not African immigrant groups or Caribbean immigrant groups, but they were sons of the enslaved, sons and daughters of the enslaved. I can't remember what it was actually called. But this other group by Tariq Nasheed says as foundational black Americans, that group reserves a privileged status. Privileged status. We are the real black Americans. And that is a fundamental contradiction to Pan-Africanism. I am unquestionably a Pan-Africanist. My loyalty to America mainly extends to family, meaning children, grandchildren, the future of our people, and the idea that we have learned a lot in America. But unlike the foundational black Americans, I have never seen anything that America put on us, gave to us, or whatever, as a positive, as a benefit. We have taken advantage of being in America, but we had to struggle always rolling the stone up the hill. We didn't get, I am an academic on the level of the highest levels of college professors. My output, my work speaks for itself. But I don't get the advantage, the privilege of being invited to join a think tank. I was at one point offered a grant salary that was $120,000. It reached $120,000 a year. They first offered me like $2,500, and I didn't respond, so they doubled it. I didn't respond, so they doubled it. Didn't respond, so they doubled it. Once it got to 60,000, I started not responding to them, but I did keep their offers, and I have those offers of certain file in the other room where I can say to people, yeah, this I'm not making this stuff up. This is what they sent me. They wanted me to work for the Department of Justice, specifically in youth violence research. That was because of my book, Prisons, The Lockdown of Black America's Future. And so therefore, I am not FBA. I would never sign on to anything. And I showed you the link to Tariq Nasheed and FBA, and you could see his own words on Twitter. I'm going to go forward. I see a word from For Africa One. Oh, African descendants of slaves. Thank you, ADOS. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I had for some time been aware of that group and reached out to them, trying to get them to come on to LIB Radio and explain yourself, please. But they never responded. And African descendants of slaves, ADOS. Thank you. And also for African One, Mano Motapa. I don't understand what that word is. Let me see if I can find that word. Mano Motapa. I don't know what that word is. 1 second. See if it can find it. Mano Motapa. And for some odd reason, my computer got real slow. The Mutapa Empire, referred to as Munhum Mutapa or Mwene Mutapa, was an African empire in Zimbabwe which expanded to what is now modern-day Mozambique. Yes, yes, yes. That's we were talking about these early empires, and the early empire at Zimbabwe might be more appropriately called the Mutapa Empire. Very good. Thank you for giving me that point. I'm going to find a way to push that into the book. So here I was talking about the power of African culture promoting unity and identity. The previous section, heritage and shared destiny, and I would say evolution of early civilizations of Mutapa, Mutapa, which would be the Zimbabwe ruins, not just the Zimbabwe ruins, Zimbabwe to Mozambique, Kush, Nubia, Sheba, and the Twa people and others in South Africa, the San. Thank you, Queen Mother. The San. Thank you for helping me out. Those go right into this chapter of the book. We're now talking about the power of African culture promoting unity and identity. Anything that separates. And Tariq Nasheed even had a name he calls these Africans who migrated into the United States. And I can't even remember the name, how insignificant this stuff stuck in my memory. I can't even the name he calls them. It's something about something like links that links them to other people, whatever. But he opposed to myself. See, I'm a Garveyite. I am under consideration from Garvey's position that I, as an African in the United States, merely disembarked from a boat, that I was chained, my ancestors were chained to be on that boat, disembarked from that enslaved carrying boat, first in the Caribbean. Most of us our ancestors took a stopover in the Caribbean before distributed to Brazil and the United States. But we had no choice about which shores that boat would embark upon. We had no choice about refusing to get on that boat unless we were prepared to fight to die on the African continent. And over 100 million, according to the best research I have found, over 100 million died resisting enslavement. So we fought to resist getting on the boat. When we got off the boat, quite often we fought, ran to the hills, such as the Maroons of Jamaica, and established quilombos in Brazil that said we are now independent again. Even though on foreign shores, we know who we are, we know our language, know our people. And when we got to places where we didn't have a common language, we sometimes forged a common language out of where we came from. That's our legacy that I can claim. But the foundational Black Americans say, no, we were domiciled inside of America. And so that is their loyalty. They see themselves as a privileged class. And when I looked at their website, all of the pictures that they posted on their website were Africans in bougie clothing and garments and positions. Now, people can dress how they want to dress. I understand that. I accept that. I prefer Kitenge, or in today's case, I prefer to be in a somewhat paramilitary stance. Somewhat. This is very superficial. But just giving homage to paramilitary. So we're talking today right now about the power of African culture promoting unity and identity. What is culture? What is culture? That's the first question that comes up. What is culture? Culture is. We've defined this in many books, beginning with the 1997 book, Moving Beyond Racism. Culture is language, spiritual expression or religion, traditions, historical perspectives. Culture is your values and moral system. Culture is the logic and reasoning system that you inherit. Culture is the primary means of guiding and ultimately controlling individual and group behavior. Culture is. One person, when asked what is culture, said, culture is everything you do. That's just not helpful. That's not helpful. Everything you do, that's not culture. Culture is defined by the sciences of sociology, anthropology, and to some extent, psychology, but mostly by sociology and anthropology, the humanities. That's where you find the definitions for culture. Culture is not everything you do. That's not helpful. So going forward, a couple more riffing ideas before we wrap it up for today's conversation. And tomorrow I'm going to come by and I will have finished this particular chapter, Roots and Culture. And we're talking about celebrating heritage. And I'm making these bullet points. Let me just put these bullet points into bullet points. What is culture and art and other cultural iconography or iconic symbology, same thing. Those are bullet points. And then we have one more main theme for this chapter, one more subchapter theme, and that one is celebrating heritage. The rich cultural tapestry of Africa. And there's just so much to celebrate. I'm going to give specifics. The rich cultural tapestry of contemporary Africa. I want to make that contemporary, because we have to understand how this serves as bridges between generations. That's a very important bullet point. We understand also the reality is, sadly as it is for me to have to admit this, the reality is, and real quickly, let me do a quick save as the program appears to be trying to crash. Don't crash Microsoft Word. Even though I think I've been hitting the save button on a regular basis, it's going to uncrash itself in just a sec. So we're talking about bridges between generations. We understand that each generation builds upon the cultural legacy and inheritance given to it from previous generations. As we reach for the stars, we are reminded that we stand upon the shoulders of giants. And it is trying to freeze up. And it's unfrozen, so hit a quick save. And now hit the bullet list. This serves as bridges between generations as we reach for the stars. We are reminded that we stand upon the shoulders of giants. Another key point, African spirituality has been invaded and severely disrupted by the colonizers' religions. And I was reminded by the Kenyan proverb, which states, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to get the exact quote from Jomo Kenyatta, who used it. In the old days, before the Europeans came, we controlled all of these lands, and they arrived with their Bible. They taught us to not only read the Bible, but to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened our eyes, we had the Bible, and they controlled the land. Very important proverb. When we opened our eyes, We have the Bible, and they control the land. And I have been to Africa numerous times. The pervasiveness of the three Abrahamic religions is quite problematic. Causing war, conflict, female abuse, and a new low-key enslavement by Arabs and Europeans. And I'm serious about that. The pervasiveness of the three Abrahamic religions is quite problematic. We're talking about Christianity, what they call Hebrewism, I call Judaism, two different things. Christianity, Judaism, and Islamism. It's quite problematic. Not always causing war. We can find in countries like Ghana, Christians and Muslims coexist quite peacefully. In Kenya, Christians and Muslims coexist quite peacefully. But then you have the problem injecting itself when Muslims from Somalia export violence into Uganda and Kenya, Tanzania, and apparently Mozambique as well. Islamic jihadists from Libya dispersing across the Sahara and the Sahel, causing immense problems in Nigeria, Niger, Mali, Chad, Burkina Faso, Western Morocco, Mauritania, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia. So yeah, we have to acknowledge culture would give us unity. But the greatest conflicts of the world is the pervasiveness of cultural fault lines. We're talking about the power of African culture promoting unity and identity. What is culture? Exploration. And we could say anti-culture. Cultural conflicts become the roots of ongoing cultural differences become the roots of ongoing war. Cultural differences are very often the root cause of conflict. And we can cite numerous nations where that is true. I'm going to begin to wrap it up today. So I got through the major ideas, the subchapter themes that will be this next chapter. The next chapter is called Roots and Culture. The subchapter is Cultural Tapestry, Embracing Africa's Rich Heritage, the Power of African Culture Promoting Unity, and Celebrating Heritage, the rich cultural tapestry of contemporary Africa. So we can build on that. There's much that we can do. And let me make it a point of Afrofuturism uses culture to allow us to envision new possibilities and future realities. That's culture. And that's a beautiful thing. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. You've been tuned in to LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. I could use some help, people. Some of you are so wonderful. You're always and you're constantly sharing and reaching out, despite the fact that we may be individually and collectively resource challenged. We're getting real close to a dynamic burst breakthrough. As we get closer to that, it's reflected in the broadcasts and the programs we do, which are striking at the heart of this thing called global white supremacy. I don't use that terminology, but you relate to that term, so I'm going to use it for our mutual communication. This thing called global white supremacy. In the book, Disaster Preparedness for World Wars 5 and 6, I call it the global elite globalist corporations, and how they are striking out at a whole new level of antagonism against everybody on the planet, except for themselves. They consider themselves above everyone else. They are the ultimate supremacists, but they're not all white. Some of them are of other ethnicities and not primarily European. We can see them from India. We can see them from Japan, from South Korea, from China, Australia. We can see them from India. Did I mention India? I did. From Myanmar. So it's not global white supremacy. It is the greedy, blood-sucking vampires that are the problem. So that's why we are building a movement. But in building this movement, don't you know the greedy, blood-sucking vampires listen to this show, and they have economically isolated your brother. I have been predominantly living off of my wisdom teachings, my health consultations, and I'm constantly hearing from people who say, I'm sick, my friend is sick, my loved one is sick. Someone's had a heart attack or a stroke, or they've been diagnosed with cancer or diabetes or some other metabolic syndrome disorder. People telling me I've been on hypertension medications for too long. I've been on them so long, I'm taking medications for the symptoms of the earlier medications which I was taking. And people are tired of being locked into these debilitating vampire matrices. Well, that's why I write the books. That's why I put solutions in the books. Miracle on 2 Feet, stroke prevention and recovery. If you can't prevent it, you have to recover from it. The recent book, Living Superfood Solutions, 22 different diseases and disorders. The new book, The Stem Cell Revolution, restore your body back to its functioning on all levels to what it was functioning at half your current age. Take your current age and divide it in half. And remember how you lived, how you felt, how you worked, how you were energetic, how you exercised, how you felt invincible. Sankofa yourself. Go back and fetch and bring it forward and teach it to your children, your family, your friends. Teach it to the elders. We need to preserve our elders, especially at this time with so much challenge. We need to preserve our elders for our future. That's what I do. And many of you know this. If you want to contact me, stay in contact. Let's stay in contact. Let's stay in contact to solve many of our common challenges. Common challenges. Text me at. Typing too fast and trying to talk at the same time. Text me at 702-580-0662. And lastly, get the books at http://kitty.biz/CRP 2012. We're going to be solving problems. That's what we do. That's who we are. That's our main challenge for the African future is just solve problems and challenges. They're going to continue to arise. We expect that. That's life. But solving them becomes a very important aspect of life. So bear with me. I'm riffing here. And Nguvu is in the house. Oh, Tethers for Africa One. You're doing a great job. You pay such close attention to the shows. I'm so proud of you. We were talking earlier. I couldn't remember the name of that group founded by Yvette Carvel. And she reminded me, ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves. And then in Nguvu, and she also listened closely to the program with Chief Sundiata Kamara. And the Foundational Black Americans call Africans, Pan-Africans, and immigrants tethers, which the word tether means to be tied to. So I'm assuming they consider themselves to be free, while immigrants are tied to something else. Interesting position. If Tariq Nasheed wants to come on LIB Radio and discuss that position, he will be welcome. If anybody knows Tariq, tell him, say, hey, we're not afraid to explore controversial and challenging topics. If it's insulting of African people, you can expect your ideas will be challenged. If it's insulting to our African elders, if it's insulting to Marcus Garvey, to Harriet Tubman, if it's insulting to Dr. Erikana Chimburu-Quao or PLO Lumumba, or our great living and transitions scholars, you will be challenged. This one guy, whose name I'm not going to mention unless somebody asks, challenged the integrity of two of my scholarly heroes, Haki Madhubuti and Molefi K. Asante. And he ended up, for having challenged them, ended up getting exposed as a long-term career secret agent, first for the Office of Naval Intelligence, and lastly, before he got fired for being exposed, the Department of Homeland Security. Could be, maybe, he's still on the payroll. The Russian media reported he was still on the payroll a year after his so-called firing, was still getting $115,000 a year from the Department of Homeland Security. So we're not afraid to explore controversial areas, to broaden our knowledge and our perspective. Queen Mother Kashiba is in the house. Oh, for Africa One says, Kitty, you skipped my comment ahead. Let me find that. Fourth, 90 to 95% of African artifacts of foreign museums, it's imperative that they are returned to enable cultural, political, and spiritual cohesion. That is a very important comment. Thank you for reminding me of that for Africa One. That's a very important, and the process is starting to happen, but it's going to have, it's got a long way to go. For 2,000 years, the Europeans have been plundering African artifacts, raiding tombs, stealing bodies, stealing jewels, stealing gold, all kind of archaeological artifacts. And now the Arabs in Egypt are continuing the plunder. Even though the plunder, they're doing it now under the national name of Egypt, but there's still Arabs in charge of that process. And many of us who are Africans say, unless the Nubians are put in charge of this, you cannot be trusted. You've facilitated the plunder for 2,000 years. Now we're expecting you to protect Africa from this plunder. So yes, for Africa One is a very important point you make. And Nguvu says, yes, all artifacts must be returned. No exceptions, no excuses. Stop the stealing, grave robbing, and acknowledge all incidents of human trafficking, which is nicknamed, quote, the slave trade. Queen Mother Kashiva says, keep up the good work. With your blessings, beloved, I receive that instruction. Did you get my donation of $50? I do not see it. Is your thing working? Well, I hope that the thing is working. I'll text you. Let's talk later. Queen Mother, let's talk later about that donation and the books you requested. So I want to thank you, Queen Mother, and everyone for being on your brother's team. We are a championship people. There's just no denying it. And we're going to be building on our championship status for this generation and for many others to follow. I am because we are Ubuntu. I am because we are. I am a great person because we are a great people. On that note, we're going to wrap it up for today. I want to thank you all for tuning in to LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. Tell your friends to tell their friends that we have our own now, and we're quite proud of who we are, what we do, and where we're going with who we are and what we do. LIB Radio, LIB TV, and livinginblack.com. Oh, also, final note, and I'm looking right now, this is one of my biggest audiences we've had for our weekday broadcasts, and especially I hope you have enjoyed. We're getting near the end of the book. The book is entitled The African Future. I'm trying to remember right now real quickly. The subtitle of the book is Empowering a United and Prosperous Africa for Future Generations. That is the name, the subtitle of the book. The cover of the book looks awesome, awesome, awesome. And many of you have seen the cover of the book. Well, in today's promo, you'll see a front cover of the book posted up there. And I think I've got that front cover tweaked in very, very nice. It says a lot, but it's not overwhelming. I think it looks really good. I think it's going to look great on the shelf. I love doing artwork for book covers. So if anybody else out there, you're publishing, you're writing your book, and you want a dynamic looking book cover, let's work together. I'd love to be able to put your vision into reality. LIB Radio, LIB TV, livinginblack.com. Tell your friends to tell their friends that we have our own now. And we're very, very proud of who we are, what we have, what we do with what we've got, and where we are going with our collective consciousness as we build the future of our greatest, greatest, greatest dreams. We're going to be changing the world for all time. Oh, I have another book that's going to be coming out here. I have one book almost finished. There's a second book almost finished, and a third book with a firm start. And this one came up real quick, but it came up as a response to an offer to come and build. And that book entitled Growing Nigeria 2025 to 2030, examining current and future trends in agriculture. I get excited when I start talking about things like this. So everybody, imagine. We are here to change and challenge the world, to challenge the future. We are LIB Radio, LIB TV. We are livinginblack.com. We'll be back again tomorrow. I think, well, it's not going to be the last one because I'm still writing, but the book should be real close to being finished. So we can go to the printer and then we can still keep on with the various chapters of the book while it returns from the printer for a much wider distribution. Peace and prosperity to each and every one of you. On your favorite, we aim to be your favorite. We are LIB Radio. We are LIB TV. We are living in black.com. Peace, y'all.